I actually don't need anybody's advice. And then you reach all the way down in there. I like to use the nicest bowl in the house. Now we got this nice bottle. Let's see what we can do with it. Subscribe. What's up, guys? The other day I was looking through all my old stuff in the back room and I found this little bottle. It's something we got for our wedding. It's actually just advice and wishes. 3.5, coming up on 4 years ago now. I found this in the back room, decided to look through them all. But after looking through all of them, I realized, made it this far without reading these things, I actually don't need anybody's advice. Got rid of those. Now we got this nice bottle. So let's see what we can do with it. So this is a pretty nice fancy jar. I don't know if we got it or if someone else got it for us, but pretty solid. But first, let's put a few facts in your head about closed terrariums. So the idea of a closed terrarium is basically that it just takes care of itself. So we'll get a drainage layer, some substrate, throw some plants in here, probably add a little bit of a cleanup crew, and then we'll add a bit of water to everything. And once we close this, the ideal is that it's just sealed. You know, water cycle occurs naturally. Everything kind of falls to the bottom to begin with, goes into that substrate layer, and then it'll evaporate, condense on the can, come back down, keep watering the plants. And the plants in there, they both make CO2 and oxygen, depending on if it's day or night. And that pretty much takes care of O2 or oxygen for the plants themselves. Cleanup crew slowly breaks things down. And as plants grow and die, it kind of just adds nutrients to itself. You know, you can leave it indefinitely and it'll just take care of itself. Basically just a mini ecosystem. So let's get started. So first thing we're gonna get added here is just gonna be a drainage layer. I've got some aquarium gravel that I got from a beta tank build. Got a bunch of extra over. If you haven't checked out that video, make sure to go check that out. I'll link it up top. Now the reason we have this gravel here is because it makes a drainage layer like I mentioned earlier. So we'll end up getting some mesh screen, put it on top of this, and then we'll get the main substrate down that all the plants are going to grow into. But with the drainage layer, it lets all the water drain past the soil, so the soil doesn't start to mold or anything. And then it also makes it easier for it to evaporate out of this drainage layer since they're bigger rocks and there's bigger gaps. We got this old window screen mesh from another project I built, the Crusty Gecko. So what I'll do is I'm going to use the lid as kind of a guide. Since the lid's a little smaller, I'm going to go just a little bit bigger than that. You really want this layer to be a little bit bigger than the entire jar itself, so there's a little extra around each edge. Kind of give us a general idea, and then we'll work that into the tank. Alright, so we've got our beautiful circle cut out here. Get that back front and center. And then I'm just going to shove this down in here. See if we need to trim it at all. Since it is a little big, I'm able to tuck the corners in. Get that shoved down in there. And I'm going to take just a little bit more gravel, pour it on top. The purpose of this mesh is just to keep the drainage layer and the substrate separated. So obviously this gravel on top is going to end up getting mixed with the substrate, but since there's a thick enough layer on the bottom already with that other gravel we added, we're still going to have a big enough drainage layer. So what I find works best when mixing substrate is to find the nicest bowl you have in the kitchen. Make sure you use that because everything turns out better when you use the nicest bowl in the kitchen. So I've showed you this before, but the first thing that we add is going to be just a little bit of cocoa fiber. We got a big bucket of it here. Drop that in there. It's going to kind of be almost our base. Next we're going to add a bit of sphagnum moss. This is going to help retain a lot of moisture as well as keep the soil a little bit lighter just so it doesn't get as compact. Water can move through it a little bit more freely. And lastly we're going to add just a little bit of orchid bark. It's just going to give it a little bit more structure. A lot of times I do like to add sand as well, but I don't have any sand on hand. That just gives it a little bit more of a texture, makes it a little bit more moldable. But seeing as how this is just going to be a closed terrarium, we won't be messing with it too much. It shouldn't make too much of a difference for us. Next we're going to add just a little bit of water to this. Just like to use purified drinking water. That might have been a little too much. You can see why I like to use the nicest bowl in the house. So you can see once it's all wet, it starts to combine together. Honestly, mixing with my hands is the best thing I've found, even when you're mixing larger quantities of it for bigger tanks. I like this consistency here. I'm actually just going to add a little bit more orchid bark. So we'll get the substrate added here. I'm going to get it in carefully so I don't make too big of a mess. And I'm going to take a paper towel, just wipe down the inside here. This doesn't really matter, but heck, it's a YouTube video, it's got to be perfect, right? So we got our substrate added now. Let's see what we can do for plants. So I'm actually going to be stealing some plants from both the fish tank as well as our Crested Gecko tank. The first plant I'm going to be stealing from this fish tank though, if you can see it, it's this tiny little plant right here. It's actually an Anubias nana petite is what it's called. It's never really flourished in this tank, but I'm pretty sure they also can grow out of water. So we're going to grab that. Hopefully that'll grow and end up being our main plant in the tank. Now if you want to be real professional, you always got to use some fancy tweezers, right? is the most professional option. Reach down, grab this, it's actually kind of glued onto another rock. So that's one option. But since we're always trying to educate you guys on this channel, if you really want to get her done, what I find works best is you get a nice thick long sleeve, and then you reach all the way down in there, grab it. See that? Beautiful. Beautiful. Next, we're going to steal some moss from the crested gecko tank. If you haven't seen the video on crested geckos, I'll link it up above. You can check that out. It goes a little bit more into depth about our setup here. But we've got a couple different spots of moss that are growing in this tank. Some on the bottom, a few on those branches, and some up towards the back. I'm actually just going to take the moss from the bottom, since that'll be growing in the most similar environment to our closed terrarium here. So we'll get that added. All right, now we're actually going to add a little bit of a cleanup crew, which is going to be our springtails. So if you guys haven't already seen the other video I made on springtails, make sure to check that out. Essentially, springtails are just tiny little bugs that eat plant matter. So you can see there's a little bit more water in here. Just added this. So take this water and we're just going to dump a whole bunch of these into the tank. See how many just went in there? That's really what's going to keep this tank nice and healthy, is that cleanup crew breaking down everything and returning it to the natural cycle. So you can see on this Anubias here, it's actually got some long roots grown already. This is a petite version, so they're not going to get too big, but they are a pretty popular aquarium plant. Hopefully this will end up being our main showpiece in this tank. We're just barely going to get those roots in there. Don't want to bury too much of this plant. We'll just bury it real lightly there. So there you can see a little bit better, kind of roughly in the middle of the tank. So now we're going to take a little bit of this moss, kind of just set it in. Perfect. So as you can see, this tank, it's not going to have too much in it. Like I said, I really just want to see how little plant life we can get away with in here. If it can start, that moss and everything can really start growing up. Typically in closed terrariums, you do need quite a bit of plant life just to keep that natural cycle flowing. I think we do need a little bit of hardscape. So let me go see what I can find. As an extra note as well, if you are enjoying this video so far, please feel free to drop a like and hit that subscribe button so you can follow for more content. And we'll hope to get you a follow-up on this tank as well as a whole bunch more in the future. Alright, so you guys can kind of see what I did here. Just added a few rocks and sticks just to add a little hardscape to this setup. Obviously it's not the most perfect thing, but I do think it framed in the Anubias kind of nicely. You guys couldn't quite see it from that front angle I had you on before, but when you're looking at it from more of a natural angle, you can see a little bit more of the scape and everything here. And I think it looks pretty good. Obviously, like I said, there's not a whole ton of plants in here, but hopefully they'll all start growing in real well for us. Now the main question is, how long will this last? We'll make an update in a few months. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Tried to keep it really simple for you, just get a little nature in the house. If you like this one, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll keep making videos in the future. Thanks for watching.